Hisory Of Avaition Poscast with Derrick, Beeler, David Rowe, and David Gorman.
All right, I want to welcome everybody into the History of Aviation Podcast for this episode 12. As always, I'm joined by Mr. David Rowe and Dave Gorman. How you guys been? Let's start with you, David Rowe.
Oh, it's been very good here. Lots of excitement in the air for us aviation fans with the balloon flying across the U.S. This past 4 or 5 days. So that's been in the news, and everybody's been following along and becoming aviation experts. Lots of thoughts and opinions on that balloon, good,
For
bad,
sure.
and kind of crazy, but still, good. Had some good weather today. Got to see a 747 fly over, took some pictures. I had a couple of P8s come to Tri-Cities Airport and shot some pictures of that. So just a little bit of aviation stuff is a good sign.
Good deal. Dave Gorman, how you been, bud?
Well, I feel good. Was actually able to get out to the airport myself for the first time in a while with some clear skies and some F5s that came in to spend a couple hours at McGee-Tyson and drop in and visit, refuel, and head back out at high speed. Always good to see those. Was hoping to catch sight of that NASA U-2 that took off out of Georgia and flew up into Canada. And it's been doing a kind of a regular thing. Kind of cool to see at least a representation of that thing flying over us, because I sure haven't seen it yet at 60,000 feet. But I hope to catch it one of these days. Got to have some really clear sky and know right where you're looking at, and hope the sun is shining in the right place as well. So, but all is well. It's nice to have a couple of good sunny and somewhat warmer days. Just kind of improves the mood of everybody around, doesn't it?
Sure does.
Absolutely.
You know, another mood improver, gentlemen, our plane tonight.
Yes, the Douglas DC-3, another gem.
Another gem, another unbelievably iconic aircraft with, it feels like there must still be thousands that are flying. I know it's not quite that high, but my goodness, where would aviation be without the DC-3, without the C-47, without this thing that is served on every continent and in probably 100 different countries. Dave Rowe, I'm looking at the picture you have behind you tonight. You've got that looks like a Basler turboprop conversion back there.
Yes, sir, I do. It actually had one stop at Tri-Cities a couple of years ago, and actually stood in the rain to take a video of it taking off from Tri-Cities Airport. That's how rare that sucker was. My friend Bruce let me know it was coming. I got to the airport, waited it out. Sure enough, he took off in the rain, and I've got a video on my Aerophile YouTube channel. So if anybody wants to see a Basler turboprop C-47/DC-3, it's out there on your Aerophile. So go check it out.
Pretty fantastic. All the modifications and all the fact that it still is in service. I don't think it's in military service in the U.S. in any current capacity, but my gosh, still hauling the freight and doing a great job, but probably still doing some passenger work in some places too.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the notes that I noticed was that the DC-3 is the only pre-World War II airplane that's still in commercial service. So that plane is still being used today as a commercial airliner. Now, it's not carrying, main passengers. It's, South America, Africa, places like that is where it's being used.
Alaska as well, correct?
Yes, absolutely. If you've ever watched Ice Pilots and Buffalo Airways, those guys, they wear that plane out. So it gets a lot of use up in Alaska. So they are out there still earning their keep, 70, 80 years after it was first introduced. I mean, it's a workhorse. It's a true legend. It's the first note that I wrote on this airplane is it's the plane that changed the world. It changed the way air travel is done. It's how it's done today. Before this, all of the airlines relied on mail, the government mail service, air mail, to survive. That's how they made money, was they would deliver mail and then take some passengers along with them. And the DC-3 is literally the first airplane to come along that made money just by hauling passengers. That's how unique it is. It could do it all on its own because it was faster, could fly further, and carry more than anything that was out, in the early 30s. So it's a true legend.
And not pressurized, so it wasn't flying up at altitude or anything like that. But in terms of comfort and speed and reliability, again, setting a standard for passenger service.
Yeah, it was one of the first airplanes that had a galley where you could get a hot meal delivered to you while you were on the trip. So, that wasn't a normal thing to have. That was new. 10,000 feet or so about the altitude with passengers. I think the actual ceiling is more like 20,000, but you'd have to have oxygen up there. So
this plane is one of those that saw service, civilian market, of course, but we think of this an awful lot on the airshow circuit as a military aircraft, and hauling cargo, hauling troops, towing gliders, as an aerial gunship, as a reconnaissance plane, a multi-role aircraft that far beyond what the creators, the guys on the with the blueprints probably foresaw for this aircraft back in the 30s. What was it originally designed to do, Dave?
The original idea for the plane was basically Boeing had come out with the Model 247, and all those planes were earmarked for United Airlines, and nobody could get their hands on it. And that was the first modern airliner. And so all the other airlines were searching for something new, and TWA contacted Douglas and said, "Hey, we need something bigger and better than that Boeing 247. Can you build us something?" So they designed the DC-1, and they liked it so much, they only built one, made some changes, and immediately went into the DC-2, and they sold the first 25 of those to TWA immediately. So they started flying. And it was so successful that, what is it, C.J. Smith? Is that his name? C.R. Smith, that's his name, from American Airlines came along and said, "Well, hey, we like this plane so much. Can you make it bigger? Can you make it longer? And can you make it a sleeper? We want to put beds in an airplane like you would ride in a train." And so this actually was on a long distance phone call between Donald Douglas and this Mr. Smith. And they came to a handshake agreement that, yes, we'll build this airplane if you'll buy the first 20. And so there was no contract. It was just a handshake. And that's what started it. It was a plane that would be competitive with the Boeing 247. That's the origin of where the plane started at.
So this plane in that 247, those were probably the first twin-engine commercial aircraft that most people saw, right? I mean, we're coming out of the Barnstormers, and we're coming out of like the mail planes, like you said before. But this is a huge step forward in terms of design, the all-metal construction and everything like that. But the twin engine and the carrying capacity, these are all big step forward in commercial aviation, airport development, runway length. I mean, I know they can take off from grass fields, of course, but I mean, you probably start seeing some improvement being made to airport design and a lot of things to being done to handle a plane of this size.
Yeah, absolutely. The landing gear was one of those things that American Airlines wanted a more robust landing gear. So because, like you're saying, they didn't have, runways everywhere. Some places they were literally landing in a field. So they needed really strong airplane. I read a thing that, so when the DC-3 was designed, there were no computers. Everything was done with a slide ruler. So all of the designers had a little fudge factor to their designs. They made everything a little bit heavier, a little bit stronger, and ultimately that was to the benefit of the C-47 DC-3 because it was bigger, stronger, and able to carry the loads that, over the years it was asked to carry. So, just smart thinking on the designer's part at Douglas.
It sure was. And I'm struck once again about that late 1930s, kind of pre-war for us. I mean, Europe was at war and Asia was at war, but we were kind of whistling past the graveyard when it comes to commitment and construction and design. And so we really didn't have a military airlift capability until this aircraft. That was something that we weren't really developing and pushing. And I mean, thank goodness it was on the drawing board when it was, because we certainly needed it as we got ourselves involved in World War II. And it served our air forces all across, the Pacific and over in Europe as well. But my gosh, being able to move as many people at one time with the efficiency of air travel, as opposed to, the long time it would take to cross the Atlantic by ship, the ability to, short hops and things like that with a plane of this size really was crucial in our war effort, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Well, just to give you an example, so, the 1936 is when the DC-3 came out. So there was 400 or 500 of those built for the airlines. And by 1939, over 90% of the nation's airline passengers were riding in a DC-3, 90% over any other airplane. That's
an incredible uptake, just to move into that market and dominate it like they did. Probably scared the heck out of Boeing, didn't it?
Oh, it absolutely had to. I mean,
and you can,
but
you can go to YouTube and type in TWA training video, and you can pull it up on YouTube, and it's actually a flight attendant training video on the DC-3 from I don't know what year, but way back.
Yeah. Well, it was the airplane for transport, passengers, cargo, 1939 pre-war, it was the plane. So obviously when World War II, when America got involved, we just said, we want them all. So the military took over, and let's see, there were 10,629 DC-3s produced by Douglas. 92% of those went to the military. That's how many of that 10,000, 92% were military. So that was its.
Yeah. Well, now sometimes we use the term C-47 and DC-3 as though that's the same aircraft. And that's not true at all, is it?
No, not at all, because the C-47 is an upgraded version. They added better flooring. They structurally strengthened it. I think they changed the engines.
Too, right?
Right. The cargo door was a big thing. A clamshell double opening door. You could drive a Jeep in it. I mean, it carried upwards of 4,000 pounds of cargo. So, anything that you could drive through those big doors, you could haul it. And that was the key thing right there, was the big doors and the fact that it was structurally solid enough to carry anything it needed to.
Those engines, the Pratt & Whitney R1830 radials,
yes.
I don't know how I didn't notice this, but I just looked it up just because I'm like, okay, what are some other aircraft that flew with those? And of course, two at a time on the DC-3 C-47s. B-24s Privateers, they had them. That's 4 more per plane. Catalinas had them. Wildcats, the most produced aircraft engine. 173,
without a doubt.
173,000 plus examples that were constructed. So, it again shows you a little bit about the reliability. The American ability to produce this, though, is unquestionably important to its success. There are all kinds of stories about aircraft that fell off to the side, literally or figuratively, with production because they couldn't keep up, the engines weren't available, or whatever. But this seems like the perfect pairing of aircraft and engine. It had power, it had range, it had, speed was nothing to beat. What was it, 250 miles an hour or so?
Right, yeah.
Speed, yeah.
That's just reliability, just the reliability of this engine to be that many. I mean, it had to be good to build that many.
Yeah, I'm way over on the speed. I'm sorry. 250 kilometers an hour, 155 miles an hour was the cruise speed, but a range of about 1,600 miles, which again, that's pretty significant. And reliability, all those factors. It really was the right aircraft at the right time, and great forward thinking by the designers at Douglas.
Yeah, absolutely. The design of it is the key to it being around today.
But thinking about that design, though, what if I'm at an airport and I see this plane come in? How can I easily tell the difference between a C-47 and a DC-3?
Well, usually the C-47s are painted in military colors.
Boy,
that's probably a quick way.
They sure help us with that, don't they?
Yeah, yes, they sure do.
That definitely does make a difference. The Astrodome on top of the fuselage over the pilot, which if you're seeing the picture behind me, I think maybe you could see it up there. That's on the C-47. So that's correct. You see that it's a C-47. And there was some tail design and the cargo doors, I guess, are the other things. And some experts out there could probably easily tell you the things that they look for. I think some antennas also help tell the difference. Now that Basler conversion behind you, Dave, of course, has the turboprop engines, and it's been extended. I think they put a plug in the fuselage there to extend it, right?
Right. Yeah. It looks a little longer. It feels bigger than a regular DC-3 because of that extra plug and the fact that the engine nacelles are kind of modern and thin. Yeah. It just has a completely different feel to the traditional DC-3 look.
I think it's certified as an entirely new aircraft too, correct?
Yes. I believe that is right. Yes.
Something else.
Yeah. You were talking about it. So I've got it listed as DC-3, C-47, C-51, C-53, RD-4, and the C-117. So, it came in a lot of variations.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that my father's first aircraft ride was in an RD-4. He was at Paris Island, made it that far before he had ridden in an airplane. And so this was one that he always liked because he liked the reliability. He would fly RD-4s down to Roosevelt Roads in Puerto Rico. I think that's where that is. That sound right? I believe it is. Across the ocean, he said he felt very, very across the South Caribbean and everything. He always felt very comfortable in this aircraft. We're saying 10,000 or so were built.
Yeah, a little over 10,000 were produced by Douglas. There were also a couple of other countries that produced it. So the total number is over 16,000. Russia and Japan actually built the DC-3. I know the Russian was under license. I'm not sure if the Japanese was a license built or not. The Russians built it as the Lusanov Li-2. Almost 5,000 of those, and NATO called them the cab. and the Showa and Nakajima companies in Japan built the LD-2 Type 0 transport, and the Allies called it a tabby, and they built about 500 of those.
So were those captured examples? I don't guess those were license built.
Well, that I need to dig a little further into that. Yeah, I did read where the Russian one was. The Russians actually came to the Douglas plant and paid money, and they were officially licensed to build them. I'm not sure the Japanese were. I need to look that further into that and figure that out.
Well, speaking of looking up things, Roosevelt Roads is in Puerto Rico. Sorry, everybody. That's where it is. Well, this is an aircraft that, again, with its World War II service, we always think about the D-Day invasion, and it's really a great pedigree for surviving aircraft that they are able to say that, hey, this one flew over the beaches at Normandy, or it was in the first wave or the second day or at some point in there. And a really fascinating story about a particular airframe. A couple of years ago, there was an airframe that made it to the Basler conversion factory, which is right there on the field at Whitman Field in Oshkosh. And some research showed that this aircraft actually led the D-Day invasion. It was lead ship, and now commemorated as That's All Brother, and touring the country from time to time. And you can get a ride in this. I believe Bruce, our friend, took a ride in it last year over in Cookville or something.
Yes, I believe he did.
He'll tell you all about it if you ask, because he sure was excited about it. But it is it's awful neat to go to shows where they have several of these guys flying in formation, and they do sometimes still have folks that will parachute out of them, and that's a great picture. That's a great thing to see. I mean, it's got a great sound. It's got a great profile. It just looks awesome in the air. And big cargo carrying capability. They're not going to be dropping pallets of stuff out on you, but it sure is impressive to see when there's a formation. And sometimes you'll see missing man formations flown in this aircraft, which is impressive to see as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The That's All Brother. I also found 3 other C-47s that are D-Day participants: Placid Lassie, Tico Bell, and Whiskey 7. So I think all 4 of those participated in D-Day and Market Garden. I also saw where the Tico Bell C-47 was a part of the Berlin airlift. So, I mean, they've got a lot of history under their wings.
Well, and that type of service was crucial. I mean, it was available. They were broken in and everything, and they knew what they had. So reliability was very, very important. The Berlin airlift, we often think about the C-54 a little bit more than the DC-3, but they served alongside and played an important role.
One of the things.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was going to say it for the Berlin airlift. They started with the C-47, and that was, I think it's like 2 million tons of food and supplies it carried. But they quickly figured out that it wasn't really the prime plane to do this because of that sloped deck. The fact that you couldn't slide pallets in and out easily because it was at an angle. It just wasn't speedy enough. They needed to get as much food in as quick as they could. So they pretty quickly, after a year or two, supplanted it with the C-54 because it was perfect.
It had a nose wheel instead of a tail wheel and a little bit easier.
Yeah, exactly. The cargo was easier to get in and out, and they could just, get the planes in, unload them way faster than they could the DC-3s or the C-47s in this case. And so they were there, but they didn't last very long.
I think one of the most interesting uses of this plane, and one that I always thought was, pretty fascinating and really cool, was the gunship. The AC-47, what do they call it? The Spooky?
The Spooky, right? Or Puff the Magic Dragon.
off the Magic Dragon. They put miniguns on this sucker and would just kind of orbit above a target and open up and light it up.
Yeah, one of the quotes I read said that there were 3 miniguns in the back of the C-47, and it was capable of covering every square foot of a football field with one round in 1 minute.
Wow.
So if you imagine, if you're in a football field, you can't escape it.
It's incredible.
There were 4 squadrons. They flew over 20,000 missions day and night from 1965 to 1969. So they put it to a lot of use in Vietnam. Another one of the uses from Vietnam was the EC-47, which was an electronic surveillance plane. They would, listen in to the Ho Chi Minh Trail or wherever and, triangulate positions and, have bombers and come in and take care of the Viet Cong there. Another one was called Gabby. It was part of a psychological warfare program. The Gabby C-47s had a speaker mounted on the cargo door, and they would have a South Vietnamese soldier talk to the Viet Cong below in the jungle just to, propaganda and try to get them to, stop what they were doing. And obviously the C-47 was used in search and rescue and leaflet drops. So, a lot of uses in Vietnam many years after World War II.
That's for sure. And this is an aircraft known for having landed on every continent. That's not too hard to get 6 continents, but that last one, the Antarctica landing is and takeoff too, is pretty impressive. I've seen pictures of these on skis. So very adaptable for that kind of thing. I've even seen pictures of C-47s on floats, which is kind of hard to believe. That's a very large plane to be landing on a lake somewhere.
Well, and that's what I want to see I want to see the video of it landing or taking off on water, because I've seen it on floats, but it's always been on land. I want to see one on the water.
I'm going to have to go look that up myself. That's very interesting.
Yeah, the pictures are out there, but I don't recall ever seeing it actually landing or taking off. So that would be something to see.
Speaking of seeing them, where can we see C-47s nearby? Before we came on the air, we mentioned here in Knoxville that there was a DC-3 that was operated by Remote Area Medical for many years out at Island Home Airport, and it since has been transferred back as they stopped using it a few years ago. And I believe it's in Ohio now. But where can we see a DC-3 or a C-47?
Well, if you go to the Commemorative Air Force, they tour a couple of DC-3s, C-47s to air shows, and they fly them into local airports. There's a plane called Flagship Detroit. If you look up their schedule, they fly all over the country. I've seen that one 2 or 3 times. A beautifully restored DC-3. And they just tour the country. So just go Commemorative Air Force or Flagship Detroit and look at their schedules, and they're coming somewhere near you at some point. They're all over the country.
I've seen pictures from the 30s of C-47s, or rather DC-3s, painted just like Flagship Detroit. It's gorgeous. It's very shiny. It looks like it's coming out of 1937 or 38. It's great looking. You can get a ride on that and go back in time 70 years, 80 years, and enjoy a comforting, slow flight around the circuit.
Well, if you're in Tennessee this summer at the Great Tennessee Air Show in Smyrna, the Flagship Detroit is scheduled to be there June of 2023, Smyrna, Tennessee. So you can go see it there. Speaking of Flagship, that was one of the things that American did with all of their planes, their DC-3s. They named them after the location that they were flying to or from. So you would have, Flagship Tennessee, Flagship Memphis, Flagship Detroit, Flagship Knoxville. And actually, flagship Knoxville still exists. It's in a museum, the American Airlines Museum in Fort Worth, Texas. So if you want to go see the flagship Knoxville, run down to Texas, and it's sitting in a museum there for you to see.
Go to Texas and see Knoxville.
Yeah.
What you have to do? Well, you can see a KC-97 in Dover, Delaware, that was based here in Knoxville. So
there you go.
I'm just glad they still exist. So, but here's one that you can occasionally see overhead coming to an air show near you. You can even without flying. Oftentimes, for a small donation, you can walk through and see what it's like inside. Most of the ones that are the D-Day veterans are painted up like that. You know, they've got the open cargo area, some benches perhaps that would carry the troops, and maybe some slings and tie downs where you could see where they would secure their cargo. So this is, again, just a fantastic aircraft, a favorite. It just feels like there's hundreds of them still flying, and my gosh, why not? It's proven itself over and over again to be right there when you need it. Just the right airplane for the job, adaptable, dependable, reliable, and got to be fun to fly, I would have to think.
For sure.
Big old tail dragger like that.
Well, that would be a dream of mine.
Well, one of the things that I've heard is that you've got to get that tail off the ground quick when you're taking off or landing. Hold it up, because it'll get squirrely with you if you don't have some authority on that rudder back there.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know that there was a Medal of Honor earned in a C-47? It's actually an AC-47, a Spooky 7-1. 1969, Airman First Class John Levitow. They were on a mission, and he wasn't even supposed to be there. He was a fill-in for somebody else. And they were orbiting, and there was an explosion in the wing. Shrapnel tore through the entire back of the plane. Everybody back there was wounded. And apparently one of the guys was getting ready to drop a flare right when that happened. Well, he dropped the flare inside the airplane, and Levitow saw it laying there. And even though he was wounded, I think he had like 40 shrapnel hits. He crawled over to this magnesium flare. It's like 3 foot long. It probably weighs 20 or 30 pounds. It's not something small. Carried it over to the door, dumped it out, and seconds later, that magnesium flare ignited. And if it had ignited in the plane would have gone down. Those magnesium flares burn at, thousands of degree temperature.
You can't put them out.
No, absolutely not. So for that, he earned the Medal of Honor in 1970. President Nixon gave him one.
As well he should have. My goodness, what a hero.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, he saved the entire plane and crew, because, like you said, if that had gone off in the plane,
that would have been
there's no getting back.
As you're listening to the History of Aviation podcast, we're talking about the Douglas DC-3. Want to jump into final thoughts here, starting with you, Dave Gorman.
Well, I just love this aircraft, and it is one that captures the imagination because it instantly feels like a slice of history, which of course it is. It's been around for such a long, long time, but I still love watching them fly. They are just magnificent and graceful, and kind of float through the air sometimes. You usually, at some of the air shows I go to, you'll see more than one fly. I've seen as many as 7 or 8 in the air before. And again, just thinking about what that must have looked like in the skies at night over Normandy on June 6th, very impressive. It's a fantastic aircraft of its time, and one that I've got to get a ride on soon. So maybe flagship Detroit at Smyrna in June. I'll see you there, right?
There we go. David Rowe, final thoughts?
This plane, it's legend. It completely revolutionized the world, made air travel easy and simple. It kind of set us up for where we are today with air travel. So, I mean, it's a true legend. it's just everywhere. It's ubiquitous. It just shows up everywhere you look. I mean, it's in all continents, like we said before. It's just the plane that, solves so many problems we didn't know we had. I've counted 46 countries where you can either see one that's airworthy, under reconstruction, or on display. There's 75 in the U.S. alone. So they're all over the place. Go out and see one. You will not be disappointed. The sounds, the smells, the looks. It's a great airplane. So one of the common sayings from aviation buffs and pilots that the only replacement for a DC-3 is another DC-3. And I think that pretty much says it all right there.
That does, for sure.
General Eisenhower certainly thought that this was one of the most important weapons of World War II.
Yes, he did. Interestingly, I actually looked that up, and there's a little bit of, there were 4 weapons that helped most win the war, and I've come up with at least 8 that are mentioned in that. Obviously, the C-47 Skytrain, the Jeep, the bazooka, the atomic bomb, bulldozer, Higgins boat, Sherman tank, M1 Garand rifle, and the 2.5-ton truck. So that quote in some form with all of those, but the C-47 is always included in that quote.
Always included. Well, that's some great preparation, David. I knew you were ready for it.
I try to be.
Loaded.
Thank you.
Social media, websites, etc. David Rowe.
Aerophile.com, AEROWEPHILE.com, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Come check me out. I've got pictures. I've got video. Lots to see on Aerophile.
I totally agree. I'm still on Aerophile. still going, watching videos.
Well, I've got over 500 right now. So, and they're still coming. I'm putting them out once a week. I've got 2 months built in already scheduled to premiere. So I just, I keep making them and I keep putting them out.
There you go. Dave Gorman, where can folks find you on the social media?
Oh, gosh. Well, I do have a presence on Twitter, a Facebook page. We can get a hold of us through our History of Aviation Facebook page. Reach out to us that way. I'm also on, what is that other one called? Hang on a minute. No, Instagram, of course, Instagram. Yes. So lots of places. Reach out. Let us know what you want to hear us talk about. We'd love to get some feedback from our listeners, and corrections are always welcome. His name is spelled Rowe. Just direct them to Dave.
And on our History of Aviation end, our History of Aviation end, we have we're on Twitter, Instagram. I'm listing all of that below. We're on Patreon as well. We have a phone number that you can call and leave voice feedback that we will play on the show. We're eventually going to start adding, once we start getting a lot of feedback, we're going to add a feedback section to the show. So that's going to be great. We've got some historians we're getting ready to schedule to come on, some aviation historians. So that's exciting. But all of History of Aviation social media is listed down below of this podcast. Doesn't matter where you're listening to it. You can scroll down and get all that information down at the bottom of the page. It's way too much to go over vocally. So it's had a great time, guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah, love it.
Thanks for listening, folks.
This is episode 12, so we'll see you all for episode 13. So for David Gorman, David Rowe, I'm Derrick Beeler. Thanks for listening to the History of Aviation Podcast.
This is Joe Morse. You are listening to the History of Aviation Podcast with Derrick Beeler, David Rowe, and David Gorman.